Let's check out the craziest Christmas comic ever. Hey comic freaks, and welcome back to Dangerous Comics. I'm your host, Dane Georges, and today we're looking at Happy by Grant Morrison and Derek Robertson. And what a better time to look at this comic than the holiday season, because I think this has to be probably the most up Christmas comic you can find. It's a little bit of a more cynical Grant Morrison comic than normal. Definitely ends up having a more positive, hopeful ending. And you'll notice we're looking at an edition of this book that promotes the Happy TV show that was on Sci-Fi. This edition came out November 2017 to coincide with the show coming out. And we see starring here on the cover is Chris Maloney in the role of Nick Sachs and Happy, the Happy Unicorn, who is voiced by Patton Oswalt. Really great casting, and I gotta say, I usually wouldn't like an edition that has a movie or TV adaptation, but I do really enjoy this TV show. I think it's honestly an amazing adaptation and might even elevate this series a little bit. A big part of that is because Grant Morrison got to help write and adapt the show for television, and I think they got to expand on a lot of great sections. But we can see that this cover is based on Derek Robertson's initial sketches. The first cover was this shot of Nick Sachs with the blue feathers floating down. And really interesting pairing here, having Grant Morrison and Derek Robertson. Derek Robertson probably being best known for his work on The Boys, and I think he is the perfect artist for this series. This is definitely Grant doing a little bit more of a down and dirty, ugly look at the world. I think the last story that Grant Morrison did like this was probably The Filth. This comic series was published from Image Comics from September 2012 to March 2013. And it was a 4-issue limited series. I think these two coming together, it's a really nice pairing because this is a story where Grant is taking a little bit of a more cynical edge of this cop, Nick Sachs, who's kind of down on his luck. He's now become a hitman, and we're kind of exploring how did his character get here and looking at it through the lens of the holidays and looking at it through family and what that's supposed to mean at that time of the year and kind of highlighting what Nick has maybe lost. And Derek is a great person for this because this series is really crude and dark and disgusting and the people are ugly, and I think that's kind of what Derek Robertson brought to The Boys as well, making those heroes really vile and just like kind of subverting what you'd expect in a comic of superheroes. And here we're just seeing him take on just like the ugliness of the world, and we're into the holiday spirit with this methed out Santa Claus that these guys who are walking down the street bump into, and he is going to be a villain that we're going to be following, but just showing kind of a dark world. And then we get to this guy who is performing a certain act in a cockroach costume, and he's about to kill this woman when he is shot by Nick Sachs. We're introduced to our hero kind of saving somebody, but just in this filthy world that we find him of hitmen and just what goes on in the underbelly of a city. When I think of Grant Morrison's work, I think of it being a little bit more light and imaginative and hopeful. And here we see just how gritty and awful this comic kind of is, just with death and violence everywhere. And so Nick Sachs called this hit to take out these two brothers, and he put out a hit on himself to bring them to him. And when they come, he kills them. But little did he know they brought their other brothers. It was two brothers, and then now he killed a third that wasn't supposed to be there. And right before he is going to take this other brother out, he has one desperate plea of saying, I have a password, I can give you a password. And it's this password that's going to unlock his family fortune. And Nick Sachs is like, that was it? That's your shot? And then he just shoots him. He's like, I don't care about your password. He also got hit a little earlier, so we see he's steaming with some bullet wounds. He's still walking. He walks out into the street, and he has a heart attack and passes out. And we're kind of getting another B plot alongside that. The people that originally put out the hit that Nick executed of the brothers are following up on trying to get that password and find out why the third brother was killed. And so Nick is taken away, and as he's in this ambulance, we start to get this cool blend of like reality to unreality. I think this really highlights why Derek Robertson is a really good pick for this comic, because of that juxtaposition of like his really gritty, realistic style to then when we start to get this and a little bit of the uncanny, cartoony gloomy character starts to bleed in. I think it really plays well against his normal style. And we see Happy does have a very like My Little Pony design to him. He's just a little bit like furrier, but he is cute. I think Derek does a good job of that. But we just instantly see that Nick is not sure if he is just all drugged up and hallucinating or if Happy is actually there. We really don't know if our character has gone insane or if he is being contacted by something a little bit out of our normal reality. And that is, a very normal Grant Morrison kind of trope, like a normal character being thrown into an unnormal circumstance and having to kind of catch up. But I really like this kind of contrast of where we also have this element of this guy just had a heart attack. He's super drugged up. So it's like, is this him? Is this like his subconscious, his little like Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder yelling at him to like get his butt into gear, or is this actually some kind of imagination bleeding through? This would have been the break of like issue 1, I believe. He's in a mob hospital, and now the mob has sent like a surgeon, Mr. Smoothie, to torture the information out of Nick Sachs. They're going to get the password to get this family fortune. But Nick is morphined up and he is falling asleep, so Happy is kind of keeping him in line. But we get this awesome sequence as he's just busting these guys up with all the hospital equipment while Happy kind of gives him directions and looks around corners for him, but he makes his escape. And this is a really fun sequence in the show. They really play a lot of these beats out, like to where he grabs the scalding hot coffee and just chugs it to keep himself awake. It's so great. I really love the detail of how Happy is able to break these panel barriers and kind of break that fourth wall. He is in the reality that Nick is, but also kind of able to bend around corners and look around and see the world in a little bit of a different view. But he guides him out of the hospital, and that's when Nick runs into another police officer, McCarthy, who he has a past with. Happy gets him out of here. He's still falling asleep behind the wheel, but he makes the escape. Happy's telling him, hey, I'm here for a reason. You got to help this little girl, Haley. She only has 52 hours left, Nick. 52 hours until something horrible happens. But then Nick goes to sleep to kind of sleep off this horrible night that he had before, but he's wasting time, and Happy's kind of getting desperate. He comes in here and he's like, ready? Don't look in the toilet, Nick. Someone drowned a giant brown squirrel. Nick kind of gets an idea, wants to kind of prove if Happy is real, so he goes to Ledick is his real name, but Nick calls him Ledick, and they're going to go to his place to do some poker, because Nick is like, hey, well, if you're real, let's put you to use, and I want to see if you can help me win. He starts to kind of flex on these guys, and he's going to use his wedding ring to start the bet, and then he's going to end up taking all these guys as cash. I didn't hear what I was talking about earlier. This coloring show that Nick has some kind of like eczema flaring up on his skin, and then Happy right next to him with those kind of bright blues. But Nick is being a little brazen, a little brash. Happy kind of disappears because he's kind of questioning if he's real, and then Happy comes back and he's like, all right, now you want me around, and if I help you, you help Haley. Promise? He says, sure. So they're just like, okay, Nick Sachs has definitely lost it, but he ends up taking all their money, and they're like, all right, we know you're up to something. Sit back down and play another hand. Sachs, I insist. Reach for a weapon. I put you down. And Nick says, what kind of weapon is a pen? Then we get a fun flip as he killed everyone at the table with just a pen. But we see that he leaves with Ledick's hat on, and he ends up putting it on this guy at the urinal. And he's just like walking around this bathroom talking to himself. And that guy eventually gets pulled in and questioned by the police because he's like, yeah, he's just walking around talking to himself. And he actually says something about a girl being strangled. So they're like, oh my God, is Nick Sachs the kitty snatcher as well? We have our Nick Sachs story. We have the mob plot line with Mr. Blue and Smoothie as they're trying to torture him to get the password out of him. We also have this C story of this gross methed out Santa Claus that definitely kidnapped all these kids, and we see them here. They are bundled up like presents as he's sending out these gross, disgusting letters to the victims' families. That is kind of like the C plot, that there's like this weird kitty snatcher going around at Christmas time that's dressed up like Santa Claus. Nick is trying to kind of get out of the city. Everything that Happy is doing is not working. Happy is trying to convince him, hey, I really need your help. You're the only one that can see me. You're the only one that can help. Nick is just saying like, why do you want me? I'm like the worst guy in the world. And then we finally get into Nick and his backstory, that he was this like star cop. He was the best of the best. He had a wife. They were happy. He got a new partner. And then he started to go on darker and darker cases on the job. We see more and more death and just horribleness that's out in the world. We see this bright-eyed eye, bushy tail kind of guy, hopeful man, just lose every bit of hope that he had as he just kind of gets corrupted and ruined by the world as his innocence is taken and just his hope that he could make a difference. And he even ends up cheating on his wife with his partner, and because of that, the mob gets their claws in him because they get some blackmail against him that he's cheating, and they're like, if you don't do what we want, if you don't become corrupt, we're going to tell your wife. He tries to be the heroic moral guy, and he says, do it. And then they end up giving the evidence to his wife, and she leaves. And this is where we start to get this one little hint that his wife might have been pregnant when she left. This man approaching him, this one's on me, Mr. Sachs. I hear you're down on your luck and you have a talent for killing. So he starts to get pulled in by these mobsters to start becoming a hitman because he's no longer a police officer. And then, so we just kind of get that contrast of this kind of heroic man that then is now this down on his luck, downtrodden man, and using his talents for something so hideous as well. Just how he's kind of become hideous on the inside and the outside. The hitmen are coming for him now. Blue has another hit out on him for like $50,000. So the hitmen are coming. Someone gets on the train for him, but he takes him out as he's in the bathroom, shoots him right in front of this woman. And he's starting to just fight with Happy as this is building up and telling Happy, look out there. No one is hopeful. Everyone is getting corrupted by the world just like me. There is no hope out there. And sends Happy out. And because the train got delayed, we see that everyone starts to get like really mad at each other. And Happy starts to kind of see the worst of humanity coming out. And we get this big reveal that comes from a prop that was used a few pages earlier as Nick was hiding his gun. We then get a reveal with this newspaper, and we look in and we see that one of the girls that was kidnapped by the Santa Claus kidnapper is Haley Hansen, and this is his daughter. So the reason you can see this blue unicorn that's connected to this girl named Haley that needs help is because Nick Sachs is Haley's father. We now see Happy is losing his blue, right? He's going from this kind of more vibrant blue to eventually this very washed out blue, kind of becoming more like Nick, realizing he needs to do something, but now people have been alerted on the train of his presence. So he's trying to get away, has to fight out. And in this, Happy has also disappeared because, he's lost his hope. And now Nick is going to have to kind of do this on his own. Now a few of our plot lines are coming together as we see these kids that are gift wrapped are now also being connected to Mr. Blue, the mobster, and we see that Santa is here drinking and he's going to be performing in front of this camera. So there's the underground human trafficking operation here that the mob is running with children. Pretty gross, and it really is where the story gets the grossest, and this whole thing kind of builds upon it. I think it is just looking at the ugliness of humanity and the ugliness of where we can go when we lose hope. Coming back to our these new plot threads as they're aligning, we're viewing a priest going and he's looking on his computer and he's being really gross here. And Nick Sachs, just in his wandering, he's following these feathers and they're leading him to this church, and that's where this priest just entered. More view of just kind of like Nick's eczema colored skin, just kind of splotchy. But as Nick is following this sign that he didn't believe in, he goes to a church. Santa Claus is getting more and more drunk and hyped for this like filmed event that they're going to be doing live. But we get Happy again. He does have his color back and he's saying, don't be scared, Haley. Nick's going to come. I know Nick's going to come. And he flies away. I know he's on his way. Where are you, Nick? But here we see, maybe there's something on this priest's computer screen that he's looking at. But the priest goes to the bathroom, comes back, and Nick is here and he's asking for help. And then he gets a look at what is on his computer screen, decks him in the face, and he sees that he's actually tuning into this broadcast. And he sees a bright, glittering blue light, and he thinks it's Happy. He brought me here, led me to the right moment so he could do this. And then Happy flies through the computer screen, and he's kind of sick of Nick, but he kind of did learn his lesson, but he kind of took it in his own way. He says, Jesus, where have you been? Ugly, stupid-looking ass. Your words. Everything's crap, and nobody's worth saving. I got the message, Nick. Now what? What do I know? You're the supernatural one. Supernatural. I'm an imaginary friend. Imaginary. What's your excuse for existing? Happy says, it's simple. A little girl lost her daddy and made me to keep her company. You think I don't know it's a cruel, rotten world? 15 minutes to save these kids, and I have to rely on you? I may be an ugly, stupid-looking ass, Nick. I'm hope. All singing, all dancing hope. doing my best to brighten up the old graveyard while you whine and moan and state the obvious. This is the power of ideas and imaginations and how it can bleed into the real world. Happy tells him where he needs to go. It's Smith Street. He shoots the pedophile priest. Then we move right on. McCarthy is now going to kind of kick in and help him a little bit. She's been forced to kind of help the mob more, but now she's throwing it all to the wind and she realizes she's going to do the right thing. Nick comes in, guns a-blazing. We get this disgusting view of Santa shooting up on the toilet before he does his scene. Nick comes in here and just blasting everybody. He gets shot a few times, stabbed and everything, but he's going to keep going. He's got a mission, but he's now being confronted by Blue, and Blue kind of started this whole thing, set him up for the kill, and then now he's kind of ending this, why did you do this? Just supply and demand. People are sick and he's just fulfilling a need in the market. Here in the last moment that Santa comes back and starts to choke him, we finally get someone else that can see Happy, and it's Santa Claus. Santa could see him earlier in the story and kind of told him to buzz off. Now Happy got the cavalry, he brought backup, and we get this awesome page turn as we get just all these imaginary friends that Happy was able to round up come and descend upon this just demented Santa. And because he's so messed up on all these drugs, he's able to see these guys, the imaginary world for him is bleeding through as well. There's a really awesome range of different kind of characters and styles. There's a Muppet kind of Kermit guy down here. Really cool just to see Derek kind of stretching and doing a bunch of different character designs on this page. Really, really awesome spread. And he's like, get away from me, get away. Now we get his attention. Go at him. I think this is a Watchmen reference here as Nick throws Santa Claus and then he ends up crashing out the window, kind of like the comedian falling, his Santa Claus hat trailing behind, much like the comedian's smiley face button. And he lands on this cop car and they say, Christmas came early. And we finally get Nick and Haley meeting, and he really doesn't even tell her that he was her father. He's kind of in his dying moments here. He's kind of bleeding out. He's made it as long as he can. He says, don't be scared. Haley, right? It's okay. I'm friends with your mom. I'm with Happy. Happy told me all about you. You're safe, kid. It's Nick, see? Like I said, I knew we'd come through. Didn't I say? And then in this last moment when he's holding Haley, he gets shot in the back by Mr. Blue. He's going to have a showdown. Nick is standing in front of all these kids, protecting them, being the hero in this last moment, kind of going back to his true self, kind of once again being what he really meant to be before he slid into the shit. But Blue is going to aim at him. He's going to blast away. Right then, McCarthy comes and saves him. The last moment, she's there. She's his partner till the very end. He says, don't tell me. I look like shit. But the paramedics are coming, but he's not going to make it. He says, you have to promise for you and your mom, for my kid, the password. And he gives her the password, which I was a little confused about even rereading this. I don't really know in this comic when he hears the password, because he's like, I have a password. Nobody knows it. And he's like, that's your shot. And then he shoots him. And I'm like, well, when did he tell him the password? I don't know. Let me know if I'm missing something in the comments. I think they might do it a little differently in the TV show too, but it's always kind of open, was there ever a password? Here, he does seem to pass something off to her. She leaves. He passes away after saying goodbye to Happy, and he gets his goodbye. Happy says, Nick, you showed me how it felt to be you. This is the least I can do. Happy, you little fucker. Always gotta be happy. Always. And he dies with a smile on his face. And he opens his hand and he's holding a blue happy feather. So just kind of further pushing how this imagination, this manifestation of hope was so much that it became real. It manifested in real life. It changed this man. It changed the trajectory of his life. Hope manifested on this Christmas night for Nick Sachs. We pan out and we are on the next day or some day in the future with McCarthy as she goes to this shop, and we see that it's this wine and liquor shop with a blue feather in the logo. She says the Don sends a message and she gives him the password in Italian, and it translates to the blue feather. So kind of blurs this line of what was Happy, why was he connected to the password? It's kind of Happy became part of Nick's life after he heard the password. So, was he a manifestation of that in his mind? There's a lot of different levels it can work on, but then he's also like how Haley sees Happy. It's really interesting, and it's done a little bit differently in the TV show as well. Overall, I think it's a wonderful, different take on the story. Here you can kind of see some early sketches, and this is a really cool addition as well because we get these kind of behind the scenes. We get this 2-page sequence of from script to ink with script from Grant Morrison to how it got broken down from thumbnails, pencils to inks. We get some breakdowns of like how they planned out the train sequence, some view of all the imaginary friends, and we got the covers, that like prawn cockroach guy that died in the beginning, some cool promo stuff they did, some sketches of the covers, and a sketch layout that Frank Quietly did for his cover as well, with a little bit of notes under it. Always love stuff like that in these kind of collected editions. And Happy did have a fun approach of just leaving these covers very like bright white, eye-catching on the stands, like white as snow, but creepy cover of Santa with his sack hanging over his shoulder, and you just see this eye poking through a hole. Very much like a Jeepers Creepers meets Santa Claus. But yeah, just a creepy, blood-soaked Christmas comic. These variant covers are super fun coming up. We saw those in the black and whites, and then now we get the full view. Man, and the Happy one by Frank Quietly here is wild as he's like got all these like light blue imaginary friends in the background, and just how hyper detailed Happy is. Like every hair of fur is like colored on him. Pretty cool. Love the teeth, all the texture on there. And then a cover by Ryan Hughes, and Ryan Hughes is more known as a designer, did a lot of logos. He did like the Batman and Robin logo for Grant Morrison's run on that comic. And if you didn't know, he's also an amazing illustrator and does these really cool like vector illustrations. And then ending on a Derek Robertson illustration in black and white. That is Happy. And like I said, this is a Christmas comic. It's also just like a fun mixture of like dark humor and fantasy, has strong illustrations, strong visuals, and a really great example of Morrison just subverting expectations and doing something a little bit out of his toolbox, but then pulling it back to kind of a classic Morrison, we're all in this together, hope wins in the end kind of story. A lot of that is even further explored in this really great TV adaptation. I believe it's currently on Netflix. So if you haven't checked it out before, I highly recommend it. There's 2 seasons. They do a Christmas season, and then the next season is Easter. And if you've seen the show and read the comic before, which one do you think is better? Let me know in the comments below. But this has been Happy by Grant Morrison and Derek Robertson. And I really appreciate you guys checking this comic out with me and spreading some holiday cheer. And if this got you excited to check out some more comics, why not check out some of mine? I'm a self-published cartoonist, and you can find all my work at danegeorges.com, which I have linked in the description below. There you'll find series like Doomskull, which is about an ex-supervillain that works in a grocery store with his minion Bag Boy. I have 3 issues of that available on my site, with a 4th that I'm finishing up currently. I also have some zines on there like Jiggly-Bub, which is about a piece of gum that God spits out, and The Passenger. And finally, we have X-Ray, which is a collection of my 4-panel webcomics. You can find all this and way more at danegeorges.com. But thank you so much for watching. If you haven't, please consider subscribing. And if you really appreciate the channel and you want to help me make more videos, consider becoming a member. You'll be able to check out videos early and see some behind the scenes. But thank you so much for your continued support, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. But until then, remember to think and read dangerously.